All right, welcome back everyone to Vuln Vibes. Today, we're going to be really taking a deep dive into something that's been making waves in the industrial cybersecurity world.
Yeah, definitely making waves. We're talking about Siemens and a pretty critical vulnerability they recently disclosed. It affects their SINAMICS S200 drives, which are used, all over in industrial automation. And the thing is, it scored a CVSS v3.1 base score of 9.8. Yeah, 9.8, so that's pretty serious.
9.8, that's about as high as it gets, right?
Pretty much. And our audience, they're pros. They're already familiar with MITRE AT, TNCK, kill chains, all that jazz.
Right, right. So no need to rehash the basics. We can just jump right into the thick of it.
Exactly. What we want to do today is really unpack why this particular flaw is so dangerous. What is it about an unlocked bootloader that translates to this huge level of risk?
Okay, so let's break it down. We're talking about CVE 2024-56336. Can you explain what an unlocked bootloader means, especially for folks who might not be super familiar with the SINAMICS S200 specifically?
Sure. Think of it like this. You know how your phone, you can only install verified operating system updates, right? There are security checks in place.
Yeah.
Well, an unlocked bootloader is kind of like if your phone just let anyone install any OS, no questions asked, no verification.
Okay, that's not good.
No, not at all. Because in the case of these drives, it means that the firmware update process, it doesn't have the necessary security checks. So an attacker could totally bypass all those safeguards and inject malicious code right into the drive's operating system.
So essentially they could replace the entire operating system with something malicious.
Exactly. And at that point, they have complete control. I mean, think about the consequences. They could disrupt operations, make a factory production line just grind to a halt.
Oh, wow.
They could manipulate data, mess with readings, or even worse, potentially cause physical damage to equipment.
That's pretty terrifying. And the thing is, it might not even be immediately obvious that something's wrong.
Right.
They could go undetected for a while.
Absolutely. It could be really insidious. Now, it's important to note that not every single SINAMICS S200 drive is vulnerable. We're talking about versions with specific serial numbers, one starting with SCVS8, SCVS9, SCVS0, or SCVSN, and an FS number of 02. So if you're listening and you work with these systems, it's time to double check. Definitely.
Yeah, go inventory those systems right now.
Right now. Because the problem is Siemens hasn't released a firmware fix yet. So until that happens, it's all about mitigation.
So what's the advice from Siemens at this point?
Well, they're recommending a defense-in-depth approach, of course, securing network access, segmenting networks, implementing intrusion detection systems, all the usual suspects. But, I want to hear your take on this, defense-in-depth. What specifically would be the most effective security controls here, given what we know about this vulnerability and how industrial networks are typically set up?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, Siemens' recommendations are a good starting point for sure, but like you said, we need to go deeper. And, especially since there's no immediate firmware update, strong network segmentation, that becomes absolutely crucial. Like isolating these vulnerable drives from any critical networks, minimizing remote access points and implementing really strict access controls. That can significantly reduce the attack surface.
Absolutely. And this whole situation, it really highlights a bigger issue, the challenges of securing these legacy systems in critical infrastructure. Because patching OT systems, it's not like patching regular IT.
Yeah.
Often you need scheduled downtime, extensive testing. You can't just push updates willy-nilly. It could disrupt operations. And that can lead to huge delays in addressing vulnerabilities, leaving these systems exposed, sometimes for a really long time.
Right. Which makes those preventative measures, the network segmentation and everything, even more important.
Yeah.
And speaking of bigger issues, this convergence of IT and OT networks, it's like a whole other can of worms, isn't it?
It is. It's blurring the lines. What used to be separate, traditional cybersecurity and industrial security, it's all coming together now. And attackers, they see this, and they're targeting these industrial control systems more and more, using vulnerabilities like this one to get into critical infrastructure. So we, as security professionals, need to be thinking holistically, recognizing how interconnected all these systems are, and prioritize security right from the start, from the design phase.
Absolutely. Okay, so to sum things up, what's the key takeaway here? What should security professionals be focusing on right now, given this vulnerability?
I think this is a wake-up call for everyone in the industry. It's not just about patching one flaw. It's about adopting a comprehensive security strategy to protect critical infrastructure, because we're living in an increasingly interconnected world. And this vulnerability, it underscores the importance of proactive security measures. Things we talked about: strong network segmentation, robust access controls, continuous monitoring. These are essential to mitigate risks, especially in these industrial environments. We can't just assume things are safe because they're air-gapped anymore.
Yeah, totally. We need a security-first approach for all industrial control systems, no exceptions.
Exactly.
So this vulnerability, it's definitely something to take seriously. It's a reminder that no system is immune to cyber attacks, and that we need to be constantly evolving our defenses.
Absolutely. And I think this leads us to a question for everyone listening. As industrial automation continues to advance, how do we make sure that security remains a top priority? It's a question we all need to be thinking about.
It is. And with that, I think that's about all the time we have for today's deep dive. Thank you all for listening. And stay vigilant out there.
Be safe, everyone.